Good morning. We have a particularly harrowing report on Myanmar today, which is available in the back of the room, and a press release is also available there. As you know, we've been following the situation of the Rohingya in northern Rakhine State for a very long time now. And after the repeated failure of the government of Myanmar to grant our office unfettered access to the worst affected areas of northern Rakhine State, the High Commissioner deployed a team of human rights officers to the Bangladeshi border with Myanmar, where an estimated 66,000 Rohingya have fled since the 9th of October last year. Mass gang rapes, killings, including of babies and young children, brutal beatings, disappearances, and other serious human rights violations by Myanmar security forces in a sealed-off area north of Mong Dao in northern Rakhine State have been detailed in the report that our team has put together. Of the 204 people individually interviewed, the vast majority reported witnessing killings, and almost half of them reported having a family member who was killed, as well as family members who were missing. Of the 101 women who were interviewed, more than half reported having suffered rape or other forms of sexual violence. Especially revolting were the accounts of children, including an 8-month-old, a 5-year-old, and a 6-year-old who were slaughtered with knives. One mother recounted how her 5-year-old daughter was trying to protect her from rape when a man took out a long knife and killed her, slitting her by the throat. In another case, an 8-month-old baby was reportedly killed while his mother was gang raped by 5 security officers. The devastating cruelty to which these Rohingya children have been subjected is unbearable, the High Commissioner says. The High Commissioner asks, what kind of hatred could make a man stab a crying baby, a baby who's crying out for his mother's milk, and for the mother to witness this murder while she is being gang raped by the very security forces who should be protecting her? What kind of national security goals could possibly be served by this? The High Commissioner calls on the international community with all its strength to join him in urging the leadership in Myanmar to bring such military operations to an end. The gravity and scale of these allegations, which are unprecedented, begs the robust reaction of the international community. All the individuals interviewed by our team had fled after the 9th of October attacks last year against 3 border guard posts. And the report cites consistent testimony indicating that hundreds of Rohingya houses, schools, markets, shops, madrasas, and mosques were burned by the army and the police, and sometimes civilian mobs as well. Numerous testimonies collected confirm that the army deliberately set fire to houses with families inside their houses, and in other cases they pushed people into already burning houses. Testimonies were collected of several cases where the army or Rakhine villagers locked an entire family, including elderly and disabled people, inside a house and set it on fire, killing them all. Several people were also killed while trying to flee for safety, and those who suffered physical injuries had almost no access to emergency medical care. Many of those interviews remained visibly traumatized by the violations that they survived or witnessed. People who did not know the fate of loved ones who had been rounded up by the army or separated while fleeing were particularly distressed. Many of them also described being taunted while they were being subject to these violations. They were told, "You are Bangladeshis and you should go back." Or, "What can your Allah do for you now? Look what we can do." The violence follows a long-standing pattern of violations and abuses, systematic and systemic discrimination, and policies of exclusion and marginalization against the Rohingya that have been in place for decades in northern Rakhine State. The High Commissioner calls on the government of Myanmar to immediately halt these grave human rights violations against its own people, instead of continuing to deny that they have occurred, and to accept the responsibility to ensure that victims have access to justice, reparations, and safety. Those who are responsible for these brutal violations must be brought to account. And the report concludes that the widespread violations against the Rohingya population indicates the very likely commission of crimes against humanity.
Okay, let's start with you, and then Yonel and Nina.
Hi, who's the government in Myanmar? The Nobel Prize winner is San Suu Kyi or the army, the military? Who's behind this killing, torture, and disappearance. So the San Suu Kyi, she won the election 2 years ago with the landslide victory. Apparently she doesn't have any power, and armies continues their killing, disappearances, and then torturing. So who's the government of Myanmar? Could you please clarify that? Thank you.
No, as you know, as I said, we've been following the situation for a very long time, and with the transition, the High Commissioner has put out various statements saying we understand the difficult situation in Myanmar. We understand that this is a delicate period of transition. We understand the difficulties between the government, the leadership of Aung San Suu Kyi, as well as the military. However, read the report. The kinds of violations that have been documented and that are ongoing cannot be justified by any kind of delicate political situation. Action needs to be taken to halt them immediately and to bring the perpetrators to justice.
Lionel.
Yes. Regarding the call of the High Commissioner to the international community to act, in regard to this situation, which is clearly horrible, is there no call for R2P in this kind of situation? I know that it's politically sensible to talk about R2P after Libya or this kind of, operation, but I'm just wondering whether, the appeal should not be stronger. Because he's just repeating what he's saying for, I don't know, years, right? And my second question will be, looking at what's happening, and of course it's only 200 interviews, but I see widespread, I see systemic, I see an ethnic dimension, a religious dimension. It's a genocide. I'm sorry, it's a genocide. It's a genocide, and I think you should say it, and don't tell me we have the intention element that is missing, because the intention element is impossible to prove perfectly, but here the intention is clear. I don't know.
Yeah. On the calls to the international community, you're right. I mean, the High Commissioner has been calling on the international community to stand up and take notice of the horrible situation in Northern Rakhine State for a very long time now. We've been seeking access. We've been seeking access. The government of Myanmar has been denying that these violations are taking place. We've been saying, okay, give us access. We will go independently assess for ourselves what has happened. This access was denied. So finally, we deployed a team to the border to be able to interview people who have fled and to interview them in line with very strict human rights methodology on what exactly happened to them. The results have been, as I've just described to you, more terrible than even we had expected. The High Commissioner is engaged with various actors in the international community. I mean, we are not ruling out any kind of action that he may call for. He may call for the Security Council to be engaged in its own way. He may call for the Human Rights Council to be engaged in its own way. There are many different mechanisms which can be drawn upon. In this case, what is clear is that something needs to be done. And the government of Myanmar has the primary responsibility, first of all, to halt these military operations. On the characterization of what happened, we have already said in a report that the High Commissioner had put out in June last year, which covered a much broader period, that what is happening could very likely amount to crimes against humanity. Ethnic cleansing is a term that the UN Human Rights Office doesn't use very much because in fact, it's not a legal term. It's not a term that has a clear definition in international human rights law. However, the kind of systematic and widespread violations that we have documented could be described as ethnic cleansing.
Nina. Same. It was the same. Okay, Laurent.
Yeah, related to that, do you think the High Commissioner will be in favor of activation of Chapter 7?
The High Commissioner is in touch with various actors in the international community, and as I said, nothing is off the table. I'll leave it at that. I mean, I would have to leave it to him to go further than that.
Okay. John, I understand you had a question, but not on Myanmar. Okay, I think that's, I don't see any other question on Myanmar. Oh yeah, Nina, just let's finish with Myanmar and then get to you.
Sorry, yeah, I just remembered. Have you shared, obviously, I guess you've shared these allegations with the government. Could you say how they've reacted, please?
We have shared these allegations with the government, both in the past and these current allegations. On how they react, I'm afraid you'd have to speak to them. It would be inappropriate for me to comment on that. I mean, we are engaged with them here in Geneva as well as in Myanmar. We are engaged with them.
John.